when Ritika has already shared with you, we, through Dr. O.P. Bhalla Foundation, we started with a series of sessions on environmental aspects, and we, in that process, invited a lot of persons having rich background with various aspects. Today, Daleep Akoi is here with us. He has a very strong connection with nature. Right from his childhood, he has been living in forests, helping the community there, and he's not only a passionate environmentalist, a renowned hotelier also. And he would naturally share his rich experience with us as far as forests are concerned. We had guests who spoke on water management, water conservation and preservation measures, best practices in water management, a revival of ponds and lakes, water bodies. We had a couple, Sharma couple, who are very senior, having very senior positions in media, and they are connected with the protection of dolphins in upper Ganges. And last week we had a lady who won Oscar award in through his documentary film on personal hygiene. This is how week after week we have been inviting personalities with various rich backgrounds, and trying to motivate our faculty, our students, and our staff to adopt best practice, how to help in preserving environment and nature. From 15th August for a week, both our campuses, along with various universities in the state of Haryana, we went in for 1 week program on plantation of trees and cleaning and solid waste management, green energy sources. That is how we have been trying to keep pace with the various policy decisions of state government and various bodies who are interested, who are guiding the country, helping in neutralizing climate change things which have impacted the environment in an adverse way. We know we have now highly polluted water bodies, and there are less rains. At times there are drought conditions. At times there are heavy floods. It is happening because, and soil is also highly polluted. This has happened. There have been felling of trees and removing of forest for urbanization, for industrialization. But out of all those protective measures which help in preserving flora, fauna, the most central thing is the rich biodiversity. We in our country have 6-7 biodiversity hotspots, and Himalayan forests, naturally they enjoy topmost position and importance. So Mr. Daleep, coming from that background, will naturally share with us his rich experience. As we are told, right from his childhood, he has been going to his family-owned this jungle retreat in very renowned Jim Corbett Tiger Sanctuary, and he had been helping the community there. We know that because due to ban on felling of trees in such protected forests, naturally the local community, which has mainly sources of income coming via produce from, so they are naturally looking for alternative sources of income. We are told he has been helping the community through propagating agroforestry and other extensive measures so that they really help in preserving the rich biodiversity and do not cut trees and live in harmony with nature. So I will not take much time and will again like to extend a welcome to our guest and really with his a lot of inputs, he will be able to enlighten all of us. And yes, after his session is over, the faculty students will like to visit Jim Corbett sanctuary, and maybe they are visiting his jungle retreat also. And this is how we will try to maintain regular contacts with him. And all of this is going to happen for the cause of nature, for the protection of rich biodiversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vadva, for your welcome. And Mr. Akoi, even before you had joined, we had taken the liberty to play a beautiful video from the website. If you allow, since we are live on Facebook now, and a lot of other guests have joined us, can you please play that video once?
Absolutely, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. It was indeed a wonderful video, and it really showcases the beauty of that place. I can surely tell that if there was any way that we could get out of this place, the next place we all would want to go to is this, as we see right now. We've always heard, sir, that it requires vision for someone to build a wonderful hotel. But it requires a great amount of passion to create a concept like Jim's Jungle Retreat. you come with a very rich experience of life, of hotels, of a lot of other areas in general. So, what made you think of or create something so different?
Well, thank you so much for having me here, Ritika, and for that introduction, Dr. Wadhwa. Really appreciate it. And also, I want to congratulate the organization, I believe the Dr. O.P. Bhalla Foundation, for doing this. It's really heartening to see an organization make the effort to have students who are actually very critical in this fight to preserve our planet and have a future where everybody actually has a home. Because this is only one planet that we have. There is no Earth B, or there's no planet B. So the young generation, the younger generation is very, or should be extremely tied and clued in to what the issues are. So congratulations on that. And now, just coming to your question about what inspired me to be here, exactly what the question was?
Yes, how did you think of creating something so different and so beautiful?
Well, I think it's really a result of the values that I grew up with. Ever since I was a child, I was very fortunate to have been brought to Corbett. So I think I may have been 2 years old when my sister and I were brought to Corbett, and we were then brought every single year. And in those days, way back in the 80s, I don't want to age myself too much in front of your crowd. We could spend the night in the forest, and we could spend several nights in the forest. So we would be there during Holi for an entire week. We would be there during Diwali. We would be there during Christmas and New Year. And it was just a delightful time, because you would be in these forest bungalows in the middle of the forest, no bijli. Your pani came from the river below. In those days, you didn't even have solar electric fences protecting the forest bungalow. So you were literally living in a forest with tigers calling out at night, and you'd speak to the forest rangers over a bonfire and talk to them about how they would go about on their beats, patrolling, making sure that there were no poaching activity happening, looking after the health of certain elephants or tigers that got injured, putting medicine in tigers' feed in case it was injured so it could heal better, make sure that there were no traps in the forest so that animals wouldn't get trapped and then killed. Just hearing all these stories, being amongst this kind of an environment, and then, conversations with the parents, because I remember my father used to say, Daleep, I think by the time you reach my age, we're going to have very few tigers left. And I used to say, that's impossible. How can you say that? We see a tiger every second day over here. But that's a child's mind. It doesn't realize what the implications are. And unfortunately, that's the sad reality. From over 40,000 tigers at the beginning of the 1900s, we came down to less than 2,000 tigers in the 1990s. So it is really critical that we save the tiger, and you need to save the tiger for many reasons, but one primary reason, if I can share with your students, is that if there is a predator in the forest, then he or she ensures that the entire ecosystem of that forest is stable. So the tiger exists, that means there are not too many deer eating up the plants and the foliage. If there's a correct balance, then there are enough trees and plants to hold the soil, and there are enough trees and plants to hold on to the moisture. And slowly that moisture gets percolated down to the roots, which then over the period of time release water, and you have your streams and your rivulets. So if you were to look at the Corbett landscape, which is about 1,300 square kilometers, if you were to capture all the water that comes from there, Ritika, you could give water to every household in Delhi, Ghaziabad, and Noida, just from 1,300 square kilometers of forest. So we need water, right? And it's not just water for the households, we need water for agriculture, because we need food. So the tiger actually is extremely linked to our survival. So when we say, you know, save the tiger, it's a beautiful animal, it's a very sexy beast. Yes, it is. It's lovely to look at. It's an amazing experience to actually be there in the forest with it. But you don't have that tiger, you don't have that predator, your forest will die. And if your forest will die, then you will not have food to eat. You will not have water to drink. And all the carbon sequestering that needs to happen with the trees that act as a carbon sink, that facility will disappear and you will be living in smoggy situations. I know people who live in Delhi, in the Delhi NCR region. You know what happens in the winter, guys. You know how pathetically polluting it is. And if we just grew forests, you know, if we just made up our minds and said, let's grow forests, even in our agricultural spaces. And in fact, some countries have begun to do that, even in their cities. They take a small patch of land and then they just grow several different species closely knit together. And that's your oxygen cylinder. So long-winded story, but to come to the crux of it, is that having those values growing up, it was just, I think, imbibed in us. And what we wanted to do then, I mean, I was working in New York and I studied in America after my schooling in Dehradun. I came back and I was like, I need to do something in the space where I actually have something that I feel passionate about. And the environment and the forest, the tiger, conservation are extremely close to my heart. So we created this, this jungle lodge, and I won't call it a resort because it's not a resort. And it was created so that we could pass on some of those messages that we received as children. So at some point, if I can, I'd like to run you through a quick presentation of what the property is about, what the Corbett Tiger Reserve is about. And yeah, will you give me a quick second? I left my dog out. I'm just going to let her in.
Sure,
she's
sure.
banging.
Please.
She's banging away. Hold on.
Sure, please. This in itself shows so much about the sensitivity that Mr. Akoi carries for everyone.
Hanji, sorry.
No, that's good. So we also hear, Mr. Akoi, that you know, the resort, the lodge is in the buffer zone, and somewhere back in 1997, there was nothing. So all the beautiful trees that we've seen in the video, they have actually been planted by you. You have actually chosen those plants, trees, and you've created this entire place. It did not exist like that.
Yes, Ritika, that's correct. We bought this land in a village called Dhela, which is a village in the buffer forest of Corbett Tiger Reserve. So what that basically means is that there was a forest here before, which was cleared for human settlement. Yes. About 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, possibly. And the government at that point of time decided that this is the land that they wanted to give to farmers who didn't have land. So they were settled here. Now, what that means is that they live a very difficult life. You know, if you're in the middle of a forest, you're bound to get animals coming in and eating your crops. It's just a natural phenomena. You know, an elephant, you've heard of man-animal conflicts all the time, elephants coming into fields and nilgai and wild boar, and the farmer has a constant battle with them. So we took a bit of land that was at the edge of the forest from this subsistence farmer, really. And he was quite happy to leave and go to another place where he could farm with the money that he got for it. But then we grew trees and we created a landscape which mirrored what landscape you already have in the Corbett Tiger Reserve. So if you come to the lodge, on the 15 acres that we have, you'll find a mix of broadleaf trees that are deciduous and evergreen, native to this region. You will find grasslands with the planting of many different grass species. You will find water bodies, as you would find in any jungle. So when you create all these different ecosystems, then you invite naturally the different species that call these ecosystems their home. So water body will see a terrapin, turtles, tortoises, frogs, snakes, dragonflies, different kinds of fish, frogs, different kinds of species of frogs, jungle owlets, fishing owls coming to take the fish and amphibians. You created the ecosystem, and then suddenly you have this plethora of wildlife coming over there because you basically created a home for them. So the idea was, if you do trees that are not native, then what's going to happen eventually is that their seeds and their fruit are going to land up going into the jungle, and then you're going to have these non-native species growing in the forest as well. And there is, we don't realize it, but there is actually a biological warfare going on with the plants, and they are fighting each other for space, just like anything on this planet. Like us humans, we are always constantly fighting. I mean, I won't say, okay, maybe not as aggressive as fighting, but if you look at, you know, how political systems work and how countries function, borders, we're always looking to see how we can secure the resources to live for ourselves. So whether it's water, whether it's land, plants do the same thing. They want to make sure that they survive. We have this species now, which is an invasive species that came from Latin America. It was brought in way back in the early 1900s to act as hedges. It was successful in Australia, and then the colonizers thought it would be very successful for India as well. So they brought it. It's called Lantana. Now you'll find Lantana growing everywhere across the country, and they are so good. Their biological warfare is so superior to any other species that they have overtaken forests. And they have overtaken forests means that they have killed other species that could have grown there. They've just grown over them and taken over. Now, what that means is that you have less grazing opportunities for deer, which means you have fewer deer populations, which means it then affects your tiger. So you have to be careful. You know, you always want to, when you're doing something proactive, like creating a forest, you want to try and recreate a forest that already exists in the area. So you want to grow trees and plants and bushes that are from the region, because the animals are accustomed to that. I mean, just to give you another example, a butterfly, for example, there are some species of butterflies that will only nest and eat one particular plant and nothing else. So now if that plant doesn't exist anymore, that butterfly species potentially is now going to get extinct. And the reason why this happens is because the plants also don't want to be eaten up. So they have their own defense mechanism. They secrete certain chemicals that could be poisonous for certain insect species that eat it. Now, over the millennia, these butterflies have honed in on this one plant which they can eat without getting poisoned. So now if you take away that one plant away because of a species that you've introduced that's killed it and not allowed it to grow, you've potentially killed the butterfly.
Listening to you, it's so knowledgeable. You know, I'm listening to certain things for the first time. There's so much depth to the whole thing. It's not simple, just go and grow, start growing trees. You have to think of the holistic balance of everything when you're trying to do something like that. That's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing these details. We're also aware that, you know, everyone is talking about organic farming today, but it is something that you have introduced around that area much before. In fact, most of the food, the raw material comes from those farms. Would you like to share something about that initiative?
Absolutely. I think everybody here needs to just reflect for a moment and see what kind of lifestyle diseases or distress that their bodies now face. I think all of us growing up now in this environment, we all have some kind of distress in our body, whether it's an autoimmune condition, whether it is something to do with diabetes, something to do with your lungs, your heart. Even at a very young age, you know, young students are facing certain lifestyle diseases that they shouldn't be facing. And that is actually a direct result of what we put inside us. So apart from the environment that we're living in, we need clean air, we need clean water to survive. We also need clean food. And unfortunately, in our race to create volumes of food for our masses of population, we have gone that route of corporations telling us, you know what, use our fertilizer, use our insecticide, because it's going to give you excellent output. Now, in the beginning, we were all seduced by that. Excellent idea. The farmer was happy. He was getting better yield. He was getting more money. There was great amount of stocks of food. But what we didn't realize is that those pesticides that we were using were eventually sneaking into our body, staying in there and infecting our kidneys, our livers, and eventually creating issues for us. So now we have succeeded, unfortunately, in polluting our water, which is our underground water, because the pesticides and insecticides and fertilizers have all seeped into the soil and gone into our underground reservoirs. And we have to keep doing it now, because the traditional way of farming was doing different kind of crop rotation, having different kinds of crops grow together, using khad, which is your cow khad or chicken khad or your goat khad, using neem leaves and cow urine as an insecticide. All those things we stopped doing. So these chemicals are designed to basically keep using more and more and more of. It's not a holistic way of producing. So if our guest is coming to us to have a deeper connect with nature and a deeper connect with themselves as a result of that, it doesn't make sense for me to serve them food that is full of chemicals. So I have consciously then made sure that we produce food ourselves in our farm, or buy food from our staff. Actually, all our staff, and I'm glad you brought that that bit of information earlier on, that all our staff actually is from the area.
That was something I was going to touch upon, because that's another wonderful thing you've done. You actually involved people from around the resort to help you with the operations and a lot of other ways.
They were farm hands, Ritika. They were literally people who had, who knew how to till the land and grow their crop, which was two crops, maximum 3 maybe. And we now have convinced them that even the lands that they have and that they're using, that to please start growing vegetables and crops that we need for our operations. So I give them the best market rate there is.
Okay.
And I ensure that now the soil that they are cultivating is no longer getting disturbed by all these chemicals. So in the long run, when you renew your soil and you bring it back to its original health, you don't need to put in, that input cost no longer is as high as it used to be. Right now, the farmer is facing that distress because his input costs are so high, but what he's getting for it is not as much. The MSP keeps changing. I mean, that's an entire different conversation, but just to distill it for you, this endeavor allows my staff member to earn a little bit of extra money from his farm. And it also allows him to move away from, because he would look for additional revenue resources by going into the jungle and harvesting the honey, or harvesting neem, or harvesting wood, or harvesting grass for his cows and buffaloes, which meant that there was less grass for the ungulates, the deer, which means that there were fewer deer, which means potentially less tigers. So it all has a ripple effect.
Yes, I understand.
So that's why, I mean, the reason we came to do this, to have this lodge over here, was not just to give a message of conservation through exciting experiences for our guests, but it was also to take care of the potential damage that was happening to our forests by human interaction with them. In the old days, we had a very symbiotic relationship with the forest. In the Vedas, and I don't know if it's the Vedas or the Upanishads, I could be wrong here, but we had the concept of 3 major forests, the Mahavan, the Tapovan, and the Srivan. And what that basically means is that you had forests allocated for specific purposes of human involvement with it. So the Mahavan, for example, you didn't touch, you left it untouched. The Srivan is where the Rishi Munis went to do the tapasya and all that. And the Tapovan and the Srivan is where you used to access fish, fruit, food, animals. And Ashoka the Great, who was one of our great emperors, in fact has his edicts, which you can see all across the country, where he tells you exactly when you can go into the forest and harvest, when you can hunt. So we have the history. We just need to go
Yes.
back to it.
Yes, I mean, the intellect, the thought, that sense always existed, but I don't know, somewhere over the years, it just got lost somewhere. So, like, very beautiful, you brought out the concept of these three forests, and I'm definitely going to go and read more about it. It's very interesting. I mean, the kind of thought that you are putting into, managing all of this is very deep, and I think it's a great learning. Everyone who's listening, not just like you corrected us, it's not a resort, it's a lodge, it's a jungle lodge, and that's how we should understand it. uh, Moving ahead, your property, like we understand, is in the buffer zone of the Jim Corbett. And what we've read about Jim Corbett is that all his life he lived in the Kala Dungi, in the Kumaon region, with his sister Maggie. And from being a hunter and organizing hunts for the viceroys in the British era and the Maharajas, he eventually started educating and sensitizing people about the importance of wildlife, the flora, and the fauna. So, would you like to share something about that?
Yeah, Corbett was an amazing man. And I don't just say that because we are called Jim's Jungle Retreat in his honor, but he really was. He was one of the pioneers for sort of independent or sort of modern India, if you can sort of call it, from the 1900s, because we were on sort of in a new century at that point of time. He was one of 7 children. His parents were Irish, British. They had come here during the colonial times. His father was a postmaster in Nainital, and he died very young after having 7 children. So in those days, I guess that's what the norm was. So Jim actually had to hunt and learn how to hunt to actually put food on the table. They were making ends meet by killing that one chicken or that one deer. So actually they had food to feed the family. And because he grew up in Nainital originally, they bought the Kala Dungi house afterward when he became more successful as an entrepreneur. So he picked up the ways of the forest through his friends who were Kumaoni. The locals, they were his buddies, and he'd run around with them and he'd do the hunting and shooting. And he was so good eventually, he knew how to discern from the floor of the forest when the tiger had crossed, how long ago, how big the tiger was it a male or was it a female? He could smell it, he could call and imitate a tiger's call. So because of these skills that he racked up in his early years, in fact, I think he shot his first leopard at 88. He was then called upon by the administration to take care of all the man-eating leopards and tigers that had started to emerge in the hills of Kumaon and Garhwal. And this happened for many reasons, but one of the major reasons was that there was a massive outbreak of a flu, and people started dying in large numbers. And up in the forests, up in the hills, they were very poor people and they were dying so quick, there wasn't enough time to burn them properly. So some of those bodies were being thrown half burnt, and some tigers then eventually got to eat it. And then that interest in human flesh arose. So some man-eaters were created that way. Some man-eaters are created because of they become old, they lose their teeth, they lose their claw, they can't hunt as well anymore, so that the next easy prey is human out of desperation. So there was one tiger, the Champawat man-eater, for example, that killed over 300 people. And nobody was able to get this tiger out, but he managed to. So his name grew, and he used to walk all by himself tens and tens and tens of kilometers every day to try and track a tiger, sit on a tree, on a machan, and finally kill it. But then what he realized, and as you rightly pointed out, that he also used to then, because the Governor General of India would come for a hunt and he'd organize it. You know, the Viceroy would come for a hunt and he'd organize it. In fact, I think the king also came and he organized a hunt in Corbett, in fact, where they used to have all these elephants in a row and they would beat the tiger out. All these beaters would go into the bush and they would try and corral the tiger to where the elephants were, and then from the elephant, they'd be shot. But he realized, he said, you know what, we're doing this, it became a sort of a fad. The Rajas and the gentry, they would say, oh, I shot 10 tigers this season, and I shot 20 tigers, and I shot, these numbers were then decreasing. And in fact, the British had a policy because they wanted to cut more forests so that they could take those trees to England and use those trees as railway patrika, the slabs to put the railway lines on it. So they could take out raw material from India and then manufacture goods in England. And the industrial revolution was happening at that point of time. So our forests were being cut at a large scale, at a massive scale. So the tiger was dispensable. You could get rid of the tiger. So we killed, we massacred the tiger. And then he realized, he said, look, if we lose the tiger, if India loses the tiger, it's lost its most majestic creature. And it will have lost a cultural resonance. I mean, remember, Ma Saraswati, Lakshmi, they're all, especially Ma Lakshmi, she sits on the tiger, that's her Vahan. We revere all our animals. I mean, Ganesh ji is an elephant.
I am so impressed, sir. You being a hotelier, living in this day and age, you talk about these things, you talk about Upanishads, you relate things back to the history so well. It is just very impressive.
Thank you, Ritika.
I can never really think of something like that coming from you. Please carry on. I couldn't help.
Yeah. So we have all these connects, with our past. And I think the lesson really is, I think everybody realizes as they get older, that once you lose the connect from your past, then you really don't have a way to the future. So all the good lessons that we do have, one shouldn't forget them. So Corbett understood that, and then he spoke with Lord Ramsay, who was at that point of time the top administrator of the United Provinces, which is called Uttar Pradesh today. And Uttarakhand at that point of time was part of United Provinces. And he said, look, we need to do this. We need to create a sanctuary for the tiger. So it started off with about 300 odd square kilometers, which he was then responsible. I'm so sorry, it wasn't Ramsay, it was Haley. Haley was a gentleman. He was the Governor General at that point of time. Ramsay was another administrator who helped create Ramnagar, which is close to where Corbett is, the main railhead. So they called it Haley National Park first, and then it changed to Ramganga National Park at some point in time after independence. And just before independence, Corbett had moved to Kenya, because he didn't know how safe he would be. And before he left, his entire farmland in Kaladungi, this village that he owned, he bequeathed it to his tenants, the farmers who were tilling his land. And even while he was in India, he actually helped them a lot. He built a huge stone wall to protect it from animals coming and raiding the crops. He gave them some infrastructure. He gave them a gun. He paid their taxes while he was in Africa until the day he died. And so when he died in the early 50s, the park was named in honor of him, Jim Corbett National Park.
Right. This is very informative. Each thing that you're saying, we will all will want to listen to this again, and of course we will have the recording to do that. But Mr. Akoi, we've also heard that Billy Arjun Singh was also instrumental in establishing the Rudwa National Park, and he even had a tigress and a leopard as a pet. We've heard that the name of the tigress was Tara. You to have a tigress as a pet. He knew you, your father, your family very well. So do you think he left some impressions on you to bring it to
Billy was a wonderful, wonderful gentleman. I met him, I think, for the last time a year or two before he passed on in Tiger Haven in Dudhwa. And he was, he came from a generation of people who were extremely passionate about conservation. And I think they had as examples, people like Jim Corbett, F.W. Champion, Salim Ali, who was an amazing ornithologist down in Bombay. There were several examples for them to emulate. And what he did, interestingly, is right up to the 60s, there were these the forest was broken up into divisions, what they call blocks. So you could rent a block for the winter season, for the hunting season, and you'd pay X amount for it, and you were allowed 1 bear, 4 deer, 10 ducks, 1 tiger. You know, you were allowed a list of things you could kill. So he would rent those 5-6 blocks that made up the Dudhwa National Park, that makes up the Dudhwa National Park today, and then he wouldn't go and shoot. So he would then, automatically there was a conservation happening over there. So he wrote to the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and said, look, can you please make Dudhwa a national park, which she assented to. She did. It became a national park. And then she also got gifted a tiger, as a tiger cub as a present from the Russians. At that point of time, if you look back at history, we had a very close relationship with the Soviet Union as part of the geopolitical power play, trying to ward off America and Pakistan. So this tigress came, and Billy Arjun Singh says, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this tiger when it grows up? I can't have it hanging around in my house. But he had been very successful in the past when he had found a leopard cub that had been abandoned. He had reared the leopard to maturity, and he had managed to train her to go back into the forest as a wild animal. You know what happens when you have a predator? You need the parent, and in this case, it's the mother, who teaches the cub how to hunt. Now, when you lose that connection, then you naturally would assume that that cub is not going to be able to survive because it doesn't know how to hunt.
Yes.
So he taught it how to hunt. With the help of his dog, he taught it how to hunt, and he eventually let the leopard go back into the forest, where she mated with another wild male, where she had her cubs, which she allowed Billy Arjun Singh to film. And she brought those cubs once during the monsoon. They were very small. I think it was her first litter, and she was terrified when the rains, and at that area of the Terai in that space in UP gets flooded every year with the rains. So she swam across with her cubs. She came back to the farm. She took the cubs up the building and into this particular room, and she nursed them there. So having heard this story, I think Mrs. Gandhi then said, you know what, I've got this cub. And I mean, it's very sweet of the Soviets to have given it to me, but I mean, like, what am I going to do with it? It'll just go into a zoo and live in a cage all its life.
Yes.
So he called her Tara, and he looked after her, and he did the same training that he did with the leopard.
The leopard, okay.
And in fact, there's a lovely film called The Leopard Who Changed Its Spots that we show over here. And then there's another docu-series on Tara. And you can see them all hanging out together. The leopard, the tiger, Billy Arjun Singh, and the dog Ely, who you'd say, what? A leopard eats a dog, and a tiger would naturally also want to eat a dog. But the top dog was the dog. So the leopard and the tiger would listen to the dog and follow the dog. And if the dog was angry or growling or disciplining them, they'd listen.
So they were all coexisting together. There was a lot of understanding happening there. Very, very interesting story. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, we also understand that you must be having guests, and yes, most of them come because of their love for wildlife or nature. But sometimes not all guests are very well versed with the laws of the jungle. So do some of them tend to surprise you? I mean, are there any interesting incidents that you'd like to share from your guests?
Gosh, I don't know if I should do that. Well, it does happen. But if I may, you see, the idea of conservation is not very simple to grasp for the layperson, because we live our lives in cities with technology, and we are tuned now to understand that modern technology, modern medicine is the way forward. So we tend to forget, and we tend to look at anything else that came from our history, our cultural history, as something that is, oh, you know, our grandparents used to do that. You know, it doesn't have that much value. So having said that, the idea for conservation and how you give that information to people is without lecturing, without making them feel that they're uneducated or they don't know. You want to try and pass on that information in a way that is interesting to them, through experiences, not in a classroom setting, through symbolism, through creatives. You have to be very creative in how you pass on that message. So that has been our endeavor. And when I show you the presentation, from the logo and how we designed it, to how we do our experiences at the property, there is always a subliminal text going through, and all the staff are trained in that, is how do we get across this message that you are one with the forest. The forest is a part of you and you are a part of the forest. Don't forget that, because that is how you're going to be able to survive in the 21st century.
Absolutely. So, yeah, rightly said. Also because, all of us have visited the park, and people from across the world in India, they visit the park. But you also see that during the season time, the place gets very overcrowded. And I'm sure this really disturbs the wildlife and the animals. So do you think that other than just you doing it at your place, is there a need to educate people and explain them about the etiquettes of the wildlife and animals? Especially, how people come into the season time, and they are, because for them it's a tourist spot. You have to come from a holiday, not understanding it's a different space and place to be.
Yeah, great question, Ritika. Corbett has, it's in that odd situation. It's close enough to Delhi and the major cities, so it gets a lot of tourism from these areas. And as you said, because it's close by, people tend to look at it as a place to come and do cup, come and chill out, and which is nice. I mean, it's a nice thing to do, but if you do it in a sensitive way, where you don't play loud music, where the hotel you're going to, you make sure you say, look, what are your waste management policies? Are you not polluting the river? Are you not polluting your forest? Then it's okay. But you're right. People need to be educated and aware that when they are visiting areas that are ecologically sensitive, then they can make the choice of choosing the right hotel or place to stay. And it doesn't have to be extremely expensive. All expensive hotels doesn't mean that they're doing the right thing in sustainability. There are a lot of hotels that are not that expensive. And I don't consider our property in a very high bracket either. I mean, I think the Taj over here is more expensive than I am. And the idea is that as a discernible purchaser of an experience, I should first look at, is that hotel doing some sustainable practices or not? That is from the purchasing point. Now, from the perspective of the service provider, like the hotel, they need to be doing a whole bunch of things as well to make sure that they are sustainable. And there is a list of things that you should anyway be doing. Like you should be anyway having LED lights instead of the old CFL, or before that the other tungsten bulbs that we used to have. They consume more electricity. How are you managing your waste? So there's a laundry list of things that you can tick off, and you can say that this is what needs to be done, so that we have the least impact on the soil and on the forest where we operate. So we've created an organization now, which is not just the hotel organization that exists for other parameters and other issues they need to discuss, but one that's specifically for eco-sensitive lodges, eco-sensitive providers, where we have a collective of how we're going to be disseminating that information to our guests when they come to the park, how they should be behaving, how they should be getting the most out of the area that they're in. It's not just the jungle. Culturally, there's a lot to see and experience in Kumaon. The food is amazing. There are certain grains that are only grown in the Kumaon Mountains that you don't find anymore in the regular marketplace. Certain rajmas, certain dals. There is a bhangi chutney. It doesn't get you high. It's very good for for protein and other sort of omega-3. So there are dances. There's a certain way that we do our Ramayana over here. The storytelling of Ramayana, which happens over several days.
Wow.
So there are a lot of other cultural aspects that people can also learn, and that is what it means to be, sustainable. You're not making everything a McDonald's, where it's all packaged in a certain way and it all looks the same. We have to preserve those things that make us who we are. India is a land of different cultures, of languages. And it's unique. Every little pocket is unique. Every 100 kilometers, you have a different dialect. Every 150 kilometers, it's, there's a specific way of making curry. So, I mean, why should we lose that? And so we promote that. We're happy to promote that. We're happy to give those experiences to our guests so that they go away looking at their holiday, not just they came and saw a tiger, but they went away with a whole bunch of
Much
other
more. Yes. And of course, there's so many, comments on TripAdvisor where you have a happy set of people who have been writing about the experience. And like you mentioned about sensitizing, as one comes to your lodge, there is a gentleman. His name has been written very often. He's the one who welcomes everyone and explains everything in detail before you can actually start your stay there. And that's great. We have so many questions, but you have mentioned that you have some presentation to share with us. I can cut short on my questions, but I want
you want to? I could just quickly go through it so that
that would be really nice.
Also get something pictographically to understand what I've been saying.
Yes.
And I've been talking a lot, so I apologize for that. When I get excited about something,
it's an absolute pleasure listening to you. Please go ahead with what you'd like to share.
Okay, so I just press the share screen button.
Yes, it should work.
Okay. Yeah. Is it up there?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Can you just turn off the annotations?
Yes, you have to turn off the annotations because we do have some students.
Go to more. Click on more. At the bottom. At the bottom right, more.
Over here.
In the Zoom, once you share the screen, you have something called as more written, and there you disable the annotations by the participants.
Like you have security, participants, chat, and then you have share screen, and somewhere you have the option of more as well.
Okay, let me see if I can go back to Zoom. I think I have lost it here. More, and then disable attendee annotation.
Yes.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. So let me just reduce this just to you, Ritika, so I can see you in the corner there. And I press play. There you go.
Yes.
Does everybody see the screen now?
Absolutely.
Okay, lovely. So this is our logo for the uninitiated or people who haven't come to the park or gone into a jungle as yet. What you see on your screen right now is the silhouette of a pug mark. This is what it looks like for a tiger when you were to see when a tiger has walked away on a bit of sand or on mud. This is the footprint it would leave. Now, what we've done with this footprint is that we, in the pad, which is, unfortunately, this cursor, I have no way to show a cursor, but the pad is the largest portion of the pug mark. You see a tree and then you see leaves. Right, Ritika, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So above that is a fish, and then you see a snake, then you see a butterfly, and then you see a bird.
Yes.
Now, what that basically means is that a tiger, which is a mammal, if it exists in the forest, its existence allows the survival of all aquatic species represented by the fish, reptilian species represented by the snake, insect species represented by the butterfly, and obviously the bird species represented by that bird. So the idea is to communicate a very simple concept. When there's a tiger, there is a forest. Or if there's a forest, a tiger will survive. And if that happens, then all these other creatures will manage to exist in it. So coming back to that earlier point of mine of how you have, how you need to pass on the conservation message. This is how, is one way of communicating that. So there you go, reptiles, insects, birds, aquatic plants, and mammals. That's the Corbett ecosystem. Now, where are we? We are in Uttarakhand. Corbett Tiger Reserve, you can see, is that bluish space on the right-hand side.
Yes.
And that little pug mark over there, if you can go a little closer, is where we are.
Yes.
So we're very close to Delhi. Now it's getting quicker. We can get there in 5 hours. And if you look at the landscape of Corbett Tiger Reserve, it's mountainous. So it's got the sub-Himalayas, it's got the Shivaliks, it's got 2 rivers, one the Kosi, which flows on the extreme right coming down, and then on top in the middle where the lake is, you trace it back up, that's the Ramganga River. And because of those 2 rivers, you have a different landscape and you have different plant species, and therefore you are, so the more variety of landscape you have, the more variety of animal and bird life the place will host. So Corbett actually has a distinction of hosting over 550 bird species, which is half the number of birds you can see in India. You can find them in Corbett. What does it look like? As I said, there's a huge lake. This is a thick sal forest, grasslands which allow you to host cheetal, what you see in the foreground, and in the background you'll see elephants. There, of course, you see the tiger.
That's a really nice shot.
Yeah, it was taken by one of my naturalists. She lived for about, I think, 13 years. And she was found in the zone called Bijrani. And she was a fantastic tiger. Eventually, her last litter was 4 cubs who stayed with her till they were themselves about 2.5, 3 years old. So when you see them all together, you'd basically see 5 grown adults walking together. It was quite a sight. She passed away last year. And there's a very fat, happy leopard who's just eaten a whole bunch. You can see this is taken by a guest of ours. Elephants. Corbett has elephants. It's one of the few parks actually that has elephants as well. And they are lovely creatures. Elephants are a matriarchal society. So they are looked after, the herd is looked after by a female who's generally the senior most. And they have amazing memory. So they know all the routes that they have to take to find food. They're foragers. They're constantly going through the forest. So they are basically the bulldozers that go into the jungle, eat, and then they do copious amounts of, leave copious amounts of excreta, which then acts as fertilizer for new trees. So they actually shape forests. And they're very critical to a forest because they're actually creating, when they're breaking branches and they're taking down trees, they're allowing other small trees to come up. So they also call the creatures that fashion forests, and they live mostly in herds with females. When a child is born, a calf is born, it's looked after by the Masi and the Bua and everybody. They all do it together. The males, when they achieve a certain maturity, they are moved out of the herd because you don't want genetic mix-up of the same herd. So you don't want a male from the same herd mating. So that eventually will weaken the genetic code of this particular herd. And because Corbett is so got such a large variety of landscapes, it also has a large variety of mammals. So just some you see on your screen right now. There's a porcupine, there's a yellow-throated marten, and coming down clockwise, there is the kakar, which is the munchtack, which is also called the barking deer. You have the hare, you have the jackal, you have snakes, sambar, of course, birds. Corbett is known for birds. These vultures are fast disappearing because of a medicine called diclofenac that we've been giving our cattle as painkillers, and that has actually killed and decimated the vulture population, which now there has been a movement to stop using that pain-killing medicine for the cattle, and there has been some revival of these guys. They're very important, actually. Vultures are critical for us because they clean up the forest floor. They clean up whatever residue of animals that have died. And if you don't clean up the forest floor, then you're potentially creating disease, which could wipe out an entire generation of deer, for example. So look at the different kinds of bird species we have. You have the hornbill type in the middle, you have the owl, you have bee-eaters, kingfisher, ibis-bill. This has 4 different species of woodpeckers. In fact, there are about 5 more. Butterflies, moths, dragonflies. Our story, I've already told you our story. We've been coming to the forest since we were 2 years old. That's my father. That's us as kids. We were allowed to fish in those days, so we'd come fishing and just be in the forest as kids and spend all the time over here.
What a lovely and a memorable childhood, Mr. Akoi. I mean, you've experienced all of this. I think you're so blessed.
Really, really, Ritika. We used to be very jealous of my cousins who'd be, they'd come back for the summer vacation and said, we went to Disneyland. And we were like, that's very cool. We also go to Disneyland. But I think looking back, I'm glad we did what we did. Disneyland came later. It wasn't half as exciting as Corbett. So we created a jungle camp where, you have luxury, which doesn't necessarily mean fancy stone and marble and granite. It really means the luxury of time, the luxury of space, the luxury where thought has been given to your experience. When you come and stay with us, that whole journey of yours while you're with us is curated from start to finish. As I was saying, it was a denuded piece of land. It was just farmland, and we have literally replanted through our Mahavan project. Created water bodies, planted trees. So this is what it looked like when it started off. A couple of years later, and what it is today. Oops, that slide came in again. So there are a lot of bird watching opportunities on the property itself. There are a pair of jackals, I call them the jackal brothers, who live on the property as well. You see this mongoose running up and down every other day. At night, if you go for a walk, you'll see a whole bunch of different owls and bats and porcupines. So the whole place is alive. We have these machans all over the place, so you can actually sit on the machans and just have your tea or whatever and read a book and just watch the wildlife as it sort of crosses you. We have these lodges which were designed with a similar forest rest house concept that you find in the jungles here, that were built by the British. Again, just sort of, local materials. The furniture was built using local craftsmanship. And then cottages, which are on the ground floor. So on 15 acres, we have only 18 accommodation units.
That is now, again, a very different thought. Somebody would always want to, as a person, try to maximize the space and how many guests you can have. You've not done that. You've not tried to crowd the place. You just kept the place as it is, untouched and very beautiful.
Yeah. So coming back to that idea, Ritika, that
that's a very cute tortoise on that screen.
Yeah, this is the children's room, family cottage. The kids love it.
Yes.
So the idea is that, your luxury is coming from your privacy. If you have too many people on the property, because you have too many rooms, then where do you get privacy?
That's true.
If you go back here, you have your verandas, you can sit on a veranda, you can see that the other cottage behind is a little further away and it's got trees and bushes, providing cover. So you don't feel like you are
in the middle with everybody around. You have your own space to introspect, think, enjoy, see and feel the place.
That's correct. So our food, dining options, we do dining in different areas. Again, this is a Golghar created with thatch, which is borrowed The idea borrowed from the Van Gujjar community, which is a nomadic pastoral tribe that lives in the forests. They originally came from NWFP in Kashmir. They're basically buffalo and cow herders. And they live in these gorgeous thatch and mud accommodation units, which I'll show you towards the end. We do a lovely experience going to their village. So our dining options are all over the place. I said we did organic food. I mean, look at the stars. I mean, who would want to sit under the stars than sit in an air-conditioned room?
This is beautiful. Very, very beautiful.
So yeah, tea time is done in different parts of the place. This is a picture I took very slimely of Their Majesties, the King and Queen of Sweden. They came and stayed with us in December last year.
Wonderful. That is wonderful.
So yeah, we do these little outdoor things, and for special occasions, we'll do, if your family is coming and you're celebrating something, so we'll do your own meal somewhere. This is our cafe, which I'm really, really proud of. You really feel like you're sitting inside, but outside. It's got glass at all sides and a thatched roof. And it's got a machan on top. So we've created these spaces with a lot of natural light. You don't use too much electricity. And the idea is just to be sustainable as much as you can. This is our organic veggie patch. And we take our guests over here to learn how we produce the food. We do different kinds of food, Angrezi, Hindustani.
This is true luxury in every sense. Everything I'm seeing on the screen, there's so much detailing to everything that I see on the screen. It is beautiful. I don't think...
Coming back to your question, it just reminded me, what have some guests said to you about your property? I think you'd ask me something about...
Yes, the TripAdvisor, as you read, one that, there are very few people who write 4 lines. Everyone who's written has actually taken time to express themselves. And that's something one does when you're touched, when all your senses are, touched by the experience that you had. So there's a great amount of variety of food, the decor, the setup. They have appreciated all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true. So this is a Kumaoni thali, which you can see over there. Okay. We do an entire thali of Kumaoni food, and we curate the dishes. We do Rampuri food, which is, Rampur is very close to us. It's about an hour and a half. Okay. And Rampur was connected to the Mughals and through Lucknow, Awadhi food. So we brought those foods in as well. And I think I had one guest chide me. She said to me very sincerely, she said, you're a wildlife lodge. I said, yes. And she says, why are you serving meat? Why are you serving chicken? I'm like, I'm sorry, but I won't have many guests if I don't serve meat and chicken. She says, no, you should go vegetarian. You should go completely vegetarian. So I mean,
you have all kinds of thoughts.
Eventually, we might go all vegetarian, but for the moment, we can't. We have a sort of a little bit of a spa, a library, a pool. And these are our different experiences. So we do walks within the property. We do walks in the jungle. We do safaris. We can go cycling. All our guides are trained by us. We get experts from the Wildlife Institute of India. We get experts from other, professionals who are bird watchers or insect specialists to come and do training with our staff. So this is the river walk. Riverbed is next to our property, and it fills up during the monsoon. But during the winter and the summer, it's there for us to use to walk on, and wonderful sightings of animals on this.
Yes, I can see this is also like a guided walk happening.
It is. Yeah, you can't go on your own. We wouldn't recommend it.
But this gypsy, this is very exciting. To go on this safari, as we see on the screen. Very interesting.
It is. It's also very exciting to be actually on foot, Ritika, because when you are on foot, there's that sense of awe that you're in a forest, and then suddenly you see a herd of deer crossing, and you're like, you're there on foot with them, and you don't realize how majestic, even a deer is, and there's just this life force that is in front of you, that is not a human. So it's quite amazing just to experience that. Of course, everything is done from a safe distance. We never go to a jungle where you might come across an animal,
suddenly you don't know what to do.
Yeah. So there's always a distance, and we're always doing it in clear spaces when you're walking through the forest. What you see on the right-hand side is a family that came visiting, and we do this really interesting walk where we describe the termite mound. So that's an anthill, what you see over there. And it's fascinating. Every story about different species takes you further and further into understanding how complex these creatures are. You know, we humans are mistaken if we think with our huge egos that we are the ones, the master creators,
Yes.
you know, who deserve to be ruling this planet. That ant, that little ant has created that anthill. And if you were to compare the size of the ant to this anthill, what you see on top, by the way, also is below ground.
Okay.
It is comparable to our building the Burj Khalifa. The ants have done themselves.
Yes.
And this anthill is actually air conditioned. So certain parts of it, the folds that exist prevent sunlight going there, so it remains humid and moist, so that the eggs can be humid and moist.
Oh my God, how
So
interesting.
Scientific reasoning that these creatures have got is mind-blowing. Same thing with bees and the beehive. So we do these talks for our guests to understand their little ecosystems as well. And kids really enjoy this termite walk.
Absolutely.
This is a scene from a lady from the village for Holi.
Okay.
So we do a little Holi celebration. Of course, we do Christmas and New Year's. We take our guests to this reservoir called Tumaria, which is the largest earthen dam built, I think it's probably in Asia. And these winter birds come from Siberia and Canada. And so our guests go over there to witness them. These are the bar-headed geese. These guys have come from Canada. Then we go to the Ramganga River in a place called Chula, where we can do angling. So it's catch and release. You can just go for a picnic. That's the Mahasir, the golden Mahasir.
Oh, wow.
And so he's caught that fish and then he'll release it. It's a fighting fish. This is the one Gujjar Dera I was telling you about. These people are nomads. They used to be nomadic, now they're settlers. And they have made their village entirely out of mud and thatch. So materials from the forest itself. And look how pretty it is.
Yes,
so
and the way they decorated it. Yes.
And very handsome people. And the local community, we, of course, employ 90% of our staff. We have a fund that proceeds, which we use to finance children's education, having summer camps for them. We source most of our supplies locally and encourage the farmers around us to grow food for us. We work with the forest department on anti-poaching activities, giving them water during the dry season. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we do with the local community and how we remain sustainable through waste management and cleaning up the water that we use to reuse it in our plantation. We use Rita, for example, as our detergent when we are washing our laundry. And the final message is, which we communicate to our guests, is seek the tiger, find the jungle.
This is beautiful. Who has created this? Who has made this?
Yeah, these guys, they're called Quick Brown Fox. They were a design team of two guys. One was a friend of mine and the other one I got to know through him. So he illustrated this, Sujay Sanan. He lives in South Africa now with his wife. And we were talking about how to communicate the idea of people coming to look for the tiger in Corbett, being the sexy beast, and then coming away, experiencing the forest.
There is so much detailing in the last final message. You know, this says it all that you've been trying to say.
Yeah. So you see the tiger's face, and within the tiger's face, you see
everything. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll stop the share now.
This is. I think I'm so glad that we have seen what you wanted to share with us, you know, because we also have students who are studying hospitality. We have the director and the dean from Faculty of Hotel Management who are also listening to you right now. And this actually, you know, sitting over here, you can never imagine, no matter how hard you try to explain, that what exists beyond what we know. And what we've understood from you has been, I'm sure it's going to really open up their you know, thought process, and they'll be more open to experiencing new things.
I hope so.
Yes, no,
Before, if we do have questions from your students, I'd be happy to take them. But I do want to put this out there. I'm very happy to have internships. And I have had people come from South America, from schools in India. If anybody of your student body is interested in coming and spending a couple of weeks or a month and helping us do a little bit of research work, some guest relations, and just understanding how a sustainable lodge works, I'd be happy to host them, and they can stay with us, and I'll take care of their food and everything, and they have a good experience.
Thank you for such a wonderful opportunity. This is really, I'm really thankful for you to offer this to the students. It's going to be a great learning, and we shall definitely get in touch with you over this. So I think, yes, we're done with the screen. You'll have to stop sharing the screen.
I haven't stopped it?
No.
Oh, I thought I'd stopped sharing.
It's a beautiful picture, of course.
Stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, I do have, I understand time is a constraint, but we have, like I just mentioned, now this question you once answered already. One of the students had mentioned that they've seen a lot of international guests, diplomats who have been coming to the lodge from the very first day. So what is it that, keeps bringing them back? I think we already have the answers through what you've shared, what brings them back. I don't think anything can impact your lodge, no matter what, because of the kind of care that you take of the guests. We have another guest. We have Summer. Summer, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Hi, Daleep. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Samarjit.
So Daleep, I just wanted to ask, I'm sure there'll be wild animals coming onto the property. I remember last time I was there were two leopards. I think there was a leopard that was spotted near the water body inside JJR. So do you have any lately any animals, wild animals that are entering or coming to the property?
Yeah, not as exciting as the leopard, Summer, but we were eating lunch yesterday, and there's about 3-4 cheetal just came running out from the forest, saw us and then running back in. But every evening we're hearing calls, so there is a lot of tiger movement happening right now. In fact, I'm told that between us and the tourism zone next to us, which is Jhirna and Dhela, there are about 13 tigers, including cubs. So if you were to, do that river walk or you sit in the Machan, I'm pretty certain. When are you coming?
Well, thank you. We'll let you know the.
Okay.
Thank you, Summer.
Thank you. Thank you.
We also have students, but now that you have given this opportunity, we would definitely request them to connect with you. I'd like to take one last question that I get from a guest as they write to me. He'd like to have your thoughts on how you compare the Kruger National Park with the Jim Corbett.
Okay. I don't know if it's a fair comparison because Kruger is massive. Africa has that advantage, and I don't know how long it will. They'll have that advantage. I really hope they do, because they're also facing some serious issues with the cattle grazers and the farmers, and how much land has been allocated for wildlife, and that space for wildlife is reducing every year, unfortunately. But the advantage that they have over Corbett is that they have massive amounts of space. The advantage we have over them is that we have a larger variety and more exciting wildlife experiences. So tracking a tiger is extremely exciting. Finding a leopard or a lion in Africa, you'll almost feel like you're in a zoo, because they're sort of there. The landscapes are very open and wide, and you have a great sort of sense of sight. So there's a lot of clear spaces. In Corbett, it's hidden. There are ravines, the thickets. You have to really sort of,
the excitement of
finding one. Yes, exactly. I hope that answered that question, but you're welcome to ask anything. Ritika, please share my email address.
Yes, sir.
the student body, I'll be happy to take questions offline.
That's really kind of you. You know, it's we really never realized how much time passed listening to the interesting experiences, the interesting conversations, and the amount of depth that you carry when you think about creating an experience. Like you initially started by saying that we have only one planet, there is no Earth B. And so therefore, as students, as people from the field of education, we also have a lot of hospitality professionals, our friends from the industry who've joined us. Yes, we all have to be, you are leaving us more mindful with what we are going to do and how we really think about things when we carry on with our work. This has been a very interesting session. I can't thank you enough because I understand you are busy with the opening of the property you've mentioned. Trust me, everybody is only looking forward to coming back to your place. You really don't have to do anything much with the kind of things that we understand you've been doing. So thank you so much for your time, Mr. Akoi. It's been a pleasure, and you've been very generous with time and sharing your experiences and also offering our students the opportunity.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you, Dr. Wadhwa. It was my pleasure being here, and I invite all of you to come and visit. It's a lovely little corner of our planet, and I know you'll leave with very happy memories.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I'd also like to thank all the guests and everyone who's viewing us live from Facebook. Thank you so much for listening to us and being with us on the platform of Dr. Omi Pala Foundation. Thank you once again, Mr. Akoi. With that, we shall now end the meeting.
Signing off.
Thanks.
Thank you.